The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Seahawks officially have got their guy under center, Sam Darnold, the new starting quarterback.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast.
The Seahawks traded Geno Smith on Friday in exchange for a third-round pick to the Raiders. It was a stunning move for many, one that was unexpected. But when contract negotiations broke down, Seattle decided to pivot. And with Pete Carroll wanting to reunite with Geno Smith, they reached that deal. And the speculation immediately was that Sam Darnold was going to be the front runner to replace him. Turns out that speculation came true, with Darnold agreeing to terms in a 3-year, $100.5 million deal, $55 million guaranteed on this contract. Now, some 12s may be looking at this deal thinking, man, $100.5 million for a quarterback who in his first 5 seasons struggled mightily in New York and Carolina. The last year that he started 6 games for the Panthers, 7 touchdowns, 3 picks. The year before that, he had 9 touchdowns, 13 picks. Only 6 more touchdowns and interceptions his 3 years with the New York Jets. But this is a very similar story to what Geno Smith endured, where his career started off really bumpy in New York. The only difference here is that Darnold didn't have to wait 5 or 6 years to get that next chance to be a starter. He had 1 season where he was a full-time backup in San Francisco with Clint Kubiak, who is now the offensive coordinator. He was the passing game coordinator in San Francisco. He's now the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. So there's a relationship there. This deal allows the Seahawks to bring in a 27-year-old quarterback that still has room to grow, has room to develop, and it's in an offensive system, as I'll talk about more later in the show, that does really fit the skill set and the strengths of Sam Darnold. And so really how this all panned out, Geno Smith returning, that's what the Seahawks wanted. They wanted to have an extension with Geno Smith after starting the last 3 seasons. But they had a line they were not going to cross in terms of salary. And once it became apparent that Geno Smith wanted $45 million per year, at least that's what the reports are suggesting, the Seahawks decided, you know what, we're going to pass on that. There wasn't a counteroffer that was given by Smith and his representatives. And you had limited time. The Seahawks wanted some stability at quarterback. They didn't want question marks there. They didn't want to go into free agency. And you had March 16th deadline day for roster bonuses for Geno Smith coming up. So they had a very short window to try to make a decision here. And ultimately, without that counteroffer coming back from Smith's team, it was evident to John Schneider and the rest of the Seahawks front office that this wasn't going to come together as quickly as it needed to, and they decided to go a different direction at quarterback. They promptly went to Sam Darnold, and from my understanding, these negotiations came together very quickly. They figured out that the price tag was going to be more in the wheelhouse of what they were willing to pay for Sam Darnold. And we're talking a Baker Mayfield type contract here. In fact, that's what the reports have suggested, that the Seahawks used Baker Mayfield's contract with the Buccaneers as a baseline, as a blueprint for signing Sam Darnold. And they were able to quickly sort through this stuff. And by Monday, this presented the best opportunity for Sam Darnold to get some stability. This is a player that's had a lot of 1-year contracts in recent years. He wanted to have a multi-year deal for good money that gave him a chance to further prove himself as well after having a Pro Bowl season for the Vikings last year. So everything was able to come together here. Now, the bottom line is Geno Smith did a lot of really good things in Seattle, and there's some risk moving on from him. We've talked about that ad nauseum since Friday when this trade was made, that you're moving on from a quarterback that dealt with a lot of bad circumstantial things the last couple years. He had a terrible offensive line in front of him, was sacked more than any quarterback in the league the last 3 years, pressured more than any quarterback in the league. They didn't have a run game last year. The year before, it wasn't much better. So the support mechanisms that were at play certainly impacted Geno Smith's numbers. That put a lot of burden on his shoulders, and there were some mistakes that certainly were made along the way. this is a roll of the dice because Sam Darnold could very easily be that player that after one breakout year in ideal environment goes to another team and isn't able to replicate that. We have seen this happen a lot in NFL history where breakout quarterbacks go to another team and they are not able to come close to producing at that level. Darnold has youth on his side, and he certainly has the physical tools. There's a reason he was picked in the top 5 in the 2018 NFL draft, 3rd overall by the Jets to be exact. He has the arm talent. He had more yardage on deep passes, according to NFL Next Gen stats, than any quarterback in the league last year. So you can still take those shots downfield. They're going to have to get some receivers that they can get the football to, obviously, but you can take your shots. He's underrated as an athlete. He's not going to be somebody you're going to do a bunch of designed runs with, but he can get away from pressure. You can use him on bootlegs, rollouts. And this is a quarterback that last year was surprisingly going against the narrative, pretty good against pressure. He threw 13 touchdown passes last year, according to Pro Football Focus, when he was under pressure. Now, the last 2 games, there's recency bias here. He absolutely did not play well at the end of the regular season and their playoff loss to the Rams. He was under pressure constantly, and he willed it under that pressure. And that has been an issue throughout Sam Darnold's career. But you saw improvements most of last season in Minnesota, and Kevin O'Connell did a really good job of having play calling that took pressure off him. They had just a good enough run game that they were able to get their play action passing attack going. So you're talking about a quarterback here who really had an ideal environment. He had the right coach. The Seahawks are hoping that Clint Kubiak, who has worked with him previously, is going to be able to carry that over. But as far as signing goes, we got to see how this plays out with the rest of free agency. I'm going to give this a B right now, and I'll explain more where the fit is at offensive scheme-wise in the next segment. But I'm going to give a B on this signing because I do think you're talking about 18th highest paid quarterback in the NFL average per year. He played like a top 10 quarterback for most of last season. Now, is he going to be able to do that in Seattle without Justin Jefferson, without Kevin O'Connell, without DK Metcalf being here? It remains to be seen what he is going to be able to do in this offense. And the Seahawks are going to have to make a lot of moves to be able to support him. They got to rebuild this offense around their new quarterback. With that being said, again, you're giving him that 18th overall, 18th ranked average per year contract. And the guaranteed money is just in the first 2 years. So this really should be looked at as a 2-year, $55 million contract. And then we'll wait and see what year 3 looks like. If he goes out and plays extremely well this year, then maybe another year down the road, you could end up extending him. Because he's only 27, this could be a quarterback that could be your starter for the next 10 plus years, potentially. But you also have to look at those first 5 years before he broke out in Minnesota and wonder if circumstances are going to cause him to regress back to that quarterback that couldn't hold on to starting jobs in New York and Carolina. If that ends up happening and this blows up in Seattle's face and Geno Smith is playing well in Las Vegas, they could be competing for a top 5 pick next year to go get their future quarterback. And who knows if John Schneider gets to make that selection. Seattle can move on with not having to absorb too big of a salary cap hit. I believe it would be $19 million that they would have to eat if they cut him after one season. So they have given themselves outs, at least affordable ones, but they are confident that this young man is going to be able to build off what he did last year.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. There's always some underdogs to play. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, and more. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to find. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The Big 12 tournament tips off with Kansas State facing Arizona State. K-State favored by 5.5, according to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
The Jets have their quarterback.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
The Jets entered the legal tampering period without a starting quarterback. And just a few hours in, they found their starting quarterback. It is Justin Fields, a former member of the Chicago Bears and a former member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a player the Jets actually passed on in 2021 with the second overall pick to select Zach Wilson. Fields was picked by Chicago later in the first round. The Bears traded up for him. Things did not really go well for him in Chicago, and he was traded to the Steelers last year. He started the first couple of games, but was unable to beat out Russell Wilson. So it's been a rough go of things for Fields. One thing I will say, though, is despite what happened last year in Pittsburgh, the Steelers apparently wanted to keep him. The Jets and Steelers got into a bidding war for Fields. The Jets ended up landing him on a 2-year contract worth $40 million, so $20 million per year. And of that $40 million, $30 million of it's guaranteed. Apparently, the Steelers were only willing to go as high as a 2-year deal for $30 million, so $15 million a year, and only $20 million of that was guaranteed. So the Jets win a bidding war for Justin Fields. And I'm not going to lie, this is a little bit more expensive than I thought it would be. I did not think Fields would cost $20 million a year, but if you look at the going rate for a starting quarterback in the NFL, it's still pretty affordable. That's at the low end of guys who are not on a rookie contract. So I can't get on the Jets for the amount that they spent on Justin Fields, because they're not paying Fields franchise quarterback money. They're paying him low-level starter money, which is where he is at this point in time. But for me, like, the money is not the main issue, because they didn't go crazy. I was expecting him to be more like 12, 13, 14, $15 million a year, but that's just a few million dollars off. And at $20 million a year, you're not paying him to be the face of your franchise. What you've done is you've essentially paid him to be a competent starter. And if he's more than that, well, then you've got yourself a bargain in year 2, because he's only going to cost $20 million. And if he's worse than that, then you've set yourself up with an overpayment in year 2. Because $20 million, even if it's not franchise quarterback money, is still money you're expecting a competent quarterback play from. But, when I looked at the horizon of this offseason, Fields was the guy I kept coming back to. The best combination of quality play and upside that was out there. And I think, as I mentioned, there's been more bad than good for Justin Fields so far in his career. But when he's been good, when he's played at a high level, he's played at a legitimately high level. He's the type of guy where you see his good stretches and you say, you know what, if he could do that consistently, we might be onto something. And that's kind of like the direction the Jets should be going in this offseason. I mean, I'm not a big believer in this year's draft class, to be honest with you. So I think that the rebound play is the right play. I mean, I think one of the things that's become clear in the NFL is that teams are too quick to give up on quarterbacks. Teams draft these quarterbacks. They're expected to save the franchise on their own. And there are some guys like Justin Herbert who step in and are ready to play day one. But there are other guys who really need time to adjust to the speed and complexity of NFL defenses. They need time to adjust to an NFL passing game. They need time to adjust to being a professional, leading a professional football team. I mean, even Patrick Mahomes did not start as a rookie, but coaches are desperate to save their jobs. Coaches view a first-round quarterback as a career maker, and so do GMs. They don't provide the necessary support for these quarterbacks. And we've seen this over and over in recent years. You want to talk Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. The Titans resurrected his career after a disappointing stretch with Miami under Adam Gase and Joe Philbin a little bit. You want to talk, Baker Mayfield, who's been up and down through his career, but when he's been in good situations like he is now in Tampa, he's done well. When he's been in bad situations like he was a couple of years in Cleveland, he's done poorly. And then the two Jets guys, I guess we could call it the two Jets Seahawks, because Geno Smith resurrected his career with Seattle, got traded to the Raiders over the weekend, and is being replaced by Sam Darnold, another early round Jets disappointment. Sometimes it takes these guys 5 or 6 years to figure out how to run an NFL passing game. Now, will Fields succeed? Look, the odds are against him. Despite everything I just said, it's always difficult to get a guy to turn his career around. But look, good quarterbacks don't grow on trees. There's no established quarterback who's on the market this year who's affordable for a team like the Jets. So you kind of have to take a calculated gamble, and that's what Fields is. He's got a tremendous set of physical tools, and he's had some degree of success. I think at this point you'd say he's probably is like a low-level starter, high-level backup. So what does Fields need to do? Well, Fields needs to become more refined as a passer. And look, at the end of the day, coaching can help you, but the biggest help comes from yourself. Fields needs to miss less reads. Fields needs to show more pocket presence. These are things that have been issues for him in his career in the pros. But I will say, while coaches can't do it for you, I hope that the Jets have a plan for Justin Fields, because this is a player with kind of a unique skill set, because he's not a terrible passer, but he's a guy who like misses more reads, misses more throws than you'd want typically in your starting quarterback. But he adds an extra dimension because he is an incredibly talented runner of the football. And what I'd like to see Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrand do is build a system around those traits, build a system around the things he does well that kind of hides the things he doesn't do well. So I think, you should see a lot of run pass options, you get the ball out of his hand quickly, allow him to make a quick read. I'd like to see, design runs for Fields, maybe some option runs where he either gives the ball to Breece Hall or keeps it himself. This could be the type of player who unlocks Breece Hall and takes Breece Hall's game to the next level. Get Fields on the move, call bootlegs. Bootlegs are usually easy passes to hit, but if your quarterback is a capable runner, sometimes he can tuck it in, run and gain a big play. These are the types of things that I want to see. I don't want to see the Jets just have a traditional drop back passing game with Fields, because first of all, that's not, you're kind of wasting his talents, if you're not utilizing his ability as a runner. And there's one criticism I have of Fields, aside from the stuff I mentioned, is I think sometimes he's a little too hesitant to run. So there are a lot of like quarterbacks who are gifted runners who maybe run too early in plays. If they don't see what they want, they just tuck in and run. Fields, I think, sometimes leaves running lanes open. So I think that that's an area where he's going to have to. I'd like to see him improve, and we're going to find out right off the bat how good Tanner Engstrand is as Jets offensive coordinator, because he's got a guy with ability. He's got a guy who hopefully has learned. Hopefully can start making good on his natural talents. And look, if it works out, Fields could conceivably be a guy who's the Jets quarterback for a couple of years. I know a lot of people aren't that excited by him. And I can understand that. There were no perfect options this offseason. There's never a perfect option out there. I'm just a big believer that this is not the draft class you want to go with, especially with sitting at the 7th overall pick, especially without a top 2 pick this year. So, I think that this was probably the best play the Jets had when you combine ability right now and when you combine potential upside. I think this was the direction to go for the New York Jets. I don't think it's an unreasonable. $20 million is a lot, but relative to other quarterbacks, it's not an enormous sum, and gives the Jets a legitimate shot. They've got a quality pass blocking offensive line. They got to work on the wide receiver position, but you start with Garrett Wilson, who, by the way, played with Fields for 2 years at Ohio State, so there's some natural chemistry there. You got Breece Hall. So look, we got to work on the skill positions, but you have a starting point there. I think that this was the right move for the Jets. Look, it's going to take a calculated gamble. I think this was probably the calculated gamble for the Jets to take.
The Chargers made a flurry of moves on the first day of NFL free agency.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, Daniel, the legal tampering period began Monday, and of course, the Chargers went out and signed all of the players that they did not. They brought in running back Najee Harris, which just seems like a Jim Harbaugh type of player, and they grabbed another Steeler, Dante Jackson, the cornerback. And then they weren't done, because they were able to bring back Khalil Mack, a very important, integral part of one of the better defenses in the NFL last year. And of course, we take a look at some of the players that actually left the Chargers, like Poona Ford and wide receiver Joshua Palmer.
The Poona Ford one, I probably had the most emotional reaction to today. That is a huge, huge loss. And I think maybe, it gets softened a little bit. If you'd seen kind of the big time moves at the positions you felt were huge needs, but that's not the way day one went of the Chargers free agency. And we told you on yesterday's show, they're going to tell you what their priorities are on day one or in the first couple of days. And we at least got a little snippet of that with the signing of Najee Harris, the biggest external free agent that they brought in on day one. And when the negotiations were happening, I hated it. I saw a 3-year, $36 million contract coming down the pipe for Najee Harris, who has, some good that we'll talk about too, but also running back wasn't the position you were hoping they would fill first. You were hoping they would spend big on the interior of the offensive line. You were hoping that they would find a legitimate pass catcher for Justin Herbert. Those were at the top of our priorities. Neither of those places are where they went. They end up going with Najee Harris, who I think how bad you actually feel about it felt a little bit better because it's a 1-year deal, right? Per Adam Schefter, it's a 1-year deal worth $9.25 up to $9.25 million, I should say. So we'll see what that actual cap hit is once the numbers kind of settle and the dust settles a little bit. But 1 year takes a little of the risk away. 1 year, you're not worried about the 1,000 carries that he's gotten 4 years prior with the Steelers as much, right? Because it's not a long-term contract. But I think it was more about the position. I think it was more about the positions you didn't choose to address, missing out on some of the big-name free agents, missing out on some of the big-name weapons, maybe changes how you feel a little bit about Najee Harris, who 31st out of 46 running backs in yards after contact per attempt. You don't love that. I think the other part of it is it felt like it kind of closed the door on a return for J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins is still out there, but I don't know. Like, it feels like if he was the priority, that would have been kind of where they went first and trying to secure him. And to me, at least, it looks like they're going in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, definitely takes a little bit of luster off of the move. The fact that they didn't go out and get the type of players and address the type of positions that we all know and see as obvious deficiencies that the Chargers need to fix. And of course, we all want it right now. I mean, we are very impatient people. We want to see those improvements immediately. But when you look at Najee Harris, it just seemed like to me, ever since we knew that he was heading towards free agency, that this was the type of player that Jim Harbaugh would absolutely go to bat for. A player who has been exceptionally durable ever since he has stepped foot in the NFL in 2021. He has not missed a single game. Of course, what does that entail, especially for a player like Najee Harris? A ton of tread that has been used on those tires. I mean, he has been carrying the football 250 plus times every single season, and that is a lot of tread. And it wasn't even just that what he did in college mirrored what he has done in the NFL. Is just a lot of touches on that body. And I mean, to his credit, he's been able to stay on the field for a guy who kind of his calling card, his bread and butter, is that physical, between the tackles, run you over type of style. And for him to be able to sit there and say, I've never missed a game, and I play a very violent position and in probably the most violent game, I think is definitely something that you have to keep in consideration when you're talking about Najee Harris.
Yeah, I think the first kind of alarming thing for me is just the dude averages 3.9 yards per carry, for his career, and you're paying him as a top 10 running back. I mean, that's going to set off a red flag for me just as far as the efficiency. And you'd say, okay, well, the Steelers' offensive line was bad. Okay. You know what I mean? That's the hardest thing for me is if we're talking about getting value and guys outplaying their contract. I don't think the Chargers right now, early in free agency, have built the foundation of a group that can actually elevate Najee Harris to maybe a level that we haven't seen him at, right? 3.9 yards per carry for your career, that's replacement level type of player. And there's a lot of different contexts and things that go into that. But at the same time, you're thinking I can get more out of him. But with the situation right now, it's just hard to think that because it's like right now you still have the same 3 interior linemen that you had last season. Like who in that group is supposed to elevate them? And I don't know. We'll see if he can outplay it. He does fit the Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman mold. And I think if you're talking about the good, 299 missed tackles for since 2021, first in the NFL. He's a chance to be a better schematic fit than he ever was with the Steelers, who run, much more zone than the Chargers do. He had the 3rd most zone carries last year out of all running backs. The Chargers now probably, more of a gap scheme, fit more what he does well, which is, 4 or 5 yards in a cloud of dust. 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Everyone's brought up. Not known as a home run hitter, but did rank 11th out of running backs in 15-plus yard runs last year. It's just not going to hit the big home run 65-yard touchdown. That's just not what Najee Harris's game is. But I do understand it from the standpoint of this is a guy, what you're getting. Like, availability is the best ability, sure, but you have to have ability too. You still need to be a good player, and that's what I hope that he can do. I hope they can elevate him from kind of the inefficient running back that he was with the Steelers for 4 years. But that being said, he's coming off of his 2 best seasons. There is some reason for hope, but like we said, it's all kind of rolled into you also missed out on these other guys, and you didn't go the way we thought you should go, which is always how it's going to go in free agency. And I'm not super shocked the Chargers didn't sign somebody to a top of the market deal and overspend on some of the crazy deals we saw out there today. But that wasn't the only move they made. And the other move they made was Chargers signing Dante Jackson per Adam Schefter, free agent cornerback Dante Jackson. The Chargers reached a 2-year agreement, $13 million contract. This one kind of came out of left field for me too.
Yeah, definitely a very random type of signing there. Like, we all knew that, Christian Fulton was heading to free agency and that the Chargers were more than likely going to have to try to fill that vacancy, whether that be in free agency or whether that be in the draft. But looking at, Dante Jackson, this is a veteran, 7 years in the league, spent most of his career with Carolina after playing with Pittsburgh last year. And he notched a career high in interceptions in 2024. He had 5 interceptions. And I really like what Daniel Popper put in his article from The Athletic. Really provided some great stats as to why the Chargers might have targeted Dante Jackson. He said, last season under defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, no team in the NFL played more zone coverage than the Chargers. According to True Media, Jackson had 13 interceptions and 36 passes defensed in zone coverage in his career, according to True Media. So that right there just tells you that what Dante Jackson does very well, what he excels at in his NFL career, is playing mostly in zone. And nobody plays more zone than Jesse Minter's defense and the Chargers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, seeing 5 interceptions and the dude go for that number, you'd be a little bit surprised, but I'll tell you the advanced metrics and at least the Pro Football Focus grading system is kind of all over the place on him, because you think a dude with 5 interceptions wouldn't rank 196th out of 223 qualifying corners as far as his coverage grade in 2024.
Yeah,
right?
Did not like his missed tackle rate either, Daniel. It was very high.
Yeah, but the weird thing is he's also was 6th in passer rating allowed at 66.9 with a minimum 25 targets. I mean, a big part of that is because, 5 times you were targeted, you intercepted the football, and that's going to obviously drop that score a little bit. But I think the biggest part for this is just the credit with me that Jesse Minter has bought for himself, where know that this signing comes with Jesse Minter kind of leading the charge for it. It seems like that's how it's been since Joe Ortiz has taken over.
Yeah.
He got him the guys he felt like worked with his defense last year, and we saw what the results were. Jesse Minter signing off on Dante Jackson. I'm signing off on Dante Jackson, especially when you consider the fact that you have 2 rookie cornerbacks from last year who both played over their head, and now, there's not as much risk to having to find that guy because you have 2 dudes who might be that guy right now.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. There's always some underdogs to play. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, and more. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to find. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The Big 12 tournament tips off with Kansas State facing Arizona State. K-State favored by 5.5, according to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray go off, and when they shoot like hell, like absolute fire, this is gonna be like
140, 127, and all they had to do was shoot 18 of 32 from 3-point range and 61% from the field.
Approved.
But they did so versus the number 1 defense in the NBA, one of the best defensive teams that we've ever seen.
And Matt, those were open shots. I will maintain. Yep.
Great process.
They were great process shots. This was exactly what the Nuggets were trying to do. They accomplished their game plan better than the Thunder could. I thought that this was a fantastic game plan drawn up by Malone, drawn up by the Nuggets coaching staff. I think that is going to get kind of tossed under the rug by a lot of folks that just want to point out the bad stuff and avoid the good stuff. This was great open shot process by everybody. And Jokic trusted guys, Murray trusted guys. Peyton Watson goes 4 of 4 from 3. Christian Brown doesn't play well in the first half and then plays pretty well in the second half, I'll say. And just a lot of contributors all across the board in a game where, Denver couldn't really get that many stops either. They struggled on defense, but it doesn't matter when you're on fire, and they were on fire tonight.
They certainly were. It was a great offensive process. They just played really, really, really well. And this is a game that I think you can go back and forth eternally on, where the Thunder fans are going to be like, well, J-Dub was out at the half, and like J-Dub's a better player than Aaron Gordon. He just is. Like, he's been a better player than Aaron Gordon this season.
Aaron was out for the whole game.
Yeah, and J-Dub, got hurt early and missed and was out at the half. Aaron was not out for the entire game, but he was out for most of it. He was out for longer. Yeah, he played the beginning or on this one, but I mean, yesterday.
No, I'm talking about this game specifically.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think you can just kind of go back and forth on this. So it's like, well, it's a back-to-back, and it's a back-to-back for both teams, and on and on and on and on. Denver continues to be absolute nails on back-to-backs. So I want to take like a big picture thing here and just tell you, hey, this is kind of what I mentioned yesterday, is like that episode aged beautifully for me. Beautifully for me. I was like, hey, Jamal Murray looked good, got open looks, just missed them. Cha-ching. Hey, the Nuggets actually had some good things going there. Bing. Like, it was good. But the big picture overall, they're 2-2 versus the Thunder. They split the season series with Oklahoma City. Not many teams have done that.
Yeah.
Probably more than OKC wants. It's like, if you look amongst the playoff teams, like, probably more than they wanted. It's great to have all these wins versus the Eastern Conference, but like, you'd rather have it versus the Nuggets. And while it's not going to matter for tiebreaker, but it does mean that Denver has shown, like, hey, yes, they were without J-Dub, we were without AG. Process-wise, strength on strength, we can split with these guys. And that matters. It just does. It just matters. And
especially when you've got the experience advantage like Denver does. And like you talked about this. I don't know if it was online or offline, but you talked about 2-2 in a 2-2 series, get to a game 5, get to a situation where they were up by a little bit, you come roaring back, the building is getting quiet, everybody's getting antsy, and you're like, okay, now you have to play basketball. And I'm just going to sit here and say that as long as Jokic and Murray are healthy, as long as Denver's process remains good, like, they have a shot. They do. And I have maintained that throughout the entire time. I don't think it's a good shot. I'm not going to sit here and lie, but I do think that because here's the thing, they still gave up 127. They still gave up a whole bunch of open shots. Like, this was,
I think, not to go down this road, because we just got to talk about how great the win was, but like, I think that's part of what frustrates you, is like, you're stuck in limbo where you're like, I can't count them out, but I can't believe in them either.
Yeah. And like, I want to believe in them. Like, here's the thing. The analyst side of me wants to like see what's happening here and be like, okay, so I know what the process is supposed to look like, and the process hasn't been that for the entire year. The fan side of me is like, okay, Jokic and Murray, I've watched this team. I've watched Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown and guys like that win a championship before. It's not that different from the year that they won it. So that's the thing, is like, it's very difficult to parse those two things for me. And I'm glad that you get games like this and tough situations like this, and where they can show off that resiliency, because they haven't had that many times where they've just been great against these top tier teams. This was really the first one in a while, Matt.
I have two hot takes. My first hot take is that they peaked too early last year, and now they're peaking at the right time.
Wow.
That's hot take number one. Here's hot take number two. And this is just me tripling down on what I already put out there. Jamal's playing better than he did all of last year. This is better. This is the best basketball Jamal has played since at least 2023, and maybe ever. He's playing awesome. Everything that Jamal is doing. Jamal ran Alex Caruso. Caruso got him on one possession in the fourth quarter. Second quarter, third quarter, Jamal ran Caruso off 3 screens and was bursting and did not look like it was. There were times early this season when he was in that struggle mode where it was like, yeah, you run him out of screens, but the guy's like right behind him because he's got no burst. It was effortless. Like, Jamal was able to get into those shots clean.
Yeah.
It was such a phenomenal job of navigating space because his body is back to wherever it needed to be. Maybe it wasn't the body. Maybe there was nothing wrong. Maybe it was the spirit. Maybe it's the vibe. I don't know. But this is the Jamal Murray that won a championship for the Denver Nuggets. This is the Jamal Murray that is capable of going off for 50 in a playoff series, putting up a 30-point triple-double, winning an NBA championship, and that fundamentally changes things. And if we are going to have torn him down, rightfully so, the way that everybody in this town did for 3 months, we owe it to a player that has given what he has to the city of Denver to lift him up now and say, this guy's playing awesome basketball.
100%. And like, people weren't dumb when they graded him out as like a top 20 or borderline top 20 player in the NBA following 2023. He played at that level. He was that guy. It's really difficult to parse sometimes when he was a little bit inconsistent in the regular seasons, but then was a killer in the playoffs and a killer in basketball, like in just those tough situations that so many other guys falter in. So it's been really impressive to watch him overall. And like, this is, if they give this version of him again, they always have a chance because he can get to the places that he needs to go. And he's just a tough shot maker. So many of the shots that he was hitting, Matt, like these were the double clutch pump fakes, jumping up in the air around the contest at the basket. And he's making them. And it's just so impressive the way that he's contorting his body and just using his athleticism to his advantage now. It's just not something that he had done a lot.
Chet Holmgren was plus 32 yesterday. He's a minus 20 tonight. So I guess he's a plus 12 on the 2 games, which I guess is like, that's a good net. But
you know who I want to give a lot of credit there? 2 guys that spent a lot of time defending Chet Holmgren today were Michael Porter and Russell Westbrook.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that both of those guys were a lot more improved just in terms of that matchup specifically. Murray got caught a couple of times fouling him. Chet does this really good spin where he then throws his arms through the contest. It's impossible not to foul him in that situation because of how good he is at getting to that spot. But Russ did a great job, and he underrated game today, much better than he was previously in this last game. And then Michael Porter, less points, plus 10 in a game as opposed to minus 33 in the game yesterday. And there are some.
Do you think Mike played well?
Do I think Mike played well?
Yeah.
I thought he played all right. Yeah.
On another day, we will
be another day, huh?
we will talk about the transition defense of Michael Porter Jr. and how I am going to gouge my eyes out with a rusty nail if I have to watch him jog back while his guy hits another open corner 3. It's killing me. It's killing me inside.
He amped it up in the 4th quarter. I will say that.
Yeah,
and just like
once the momentum got going, they absolutely ran over him.
Yeah, and that's just an important aspect of things. Like that was what OKC had done previously to them. So the fact that Denver can do it to OKC does give me some confidence in this matchup again. They're like, look, there were a lot of folks, and I know that there's actually I'm going to save that's going to stay in house.
Okay.
I can't say it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do that one after the lights go off.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. There's always some underdogs to play. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, and more. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to find. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The Big 12 tournament tips off with Kansas State facing Arizona State. K-State favored by 5.5, according to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
The Knicks needed a big win, and boy, did they get one.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
All right, Gavin, let's get into this big win. Admittedly, it was a late one. We were both dozing a little bit, so we're recording this in the morning. 133-104, the Knicks win over the Kings. And to me, I don't think this is a hot take. I mean, he wasn't quite the high scorer, but OG Anunoby had his fingerprints all over this one. I feel like he made his case for being the guy who might be the difference maker to step up during this time with Brunson out right now. But just a really phenomenal effort overall for him. 24 points, 8 assists, 7 boards. Was attacking the basket with reckless abandon, but also like making really smart reads out of that. Stuff that like passes that we haven't really seen out of him, I feel like, since early on this season, when he was attacking from the corners and making nice passes. And, a lot of it goes to the whole team game plan of just cutting and, just running around and being active the entire game. But I thought that this was just a really standout performance for OG. 5 steals also, which I didn't even bring up.
Yeah, it was a complete game from him. A career high 8 assists, we should note, which is assuming StatMuse is not lying to me. I was shocked to see he's never had more than 6 assists in a game, which for someone who's been like a third or fourth option for a couple of years, I would say is a little bit of an indictment on his passing. But this is not the night to talk about what OG hasn't done in the past, because he was exceptional and the whole team was exceptional, frankly. And look, you can look at the Kings and say, all right, it's not the Lakers, it's not the Celtics, it's not the Cavs, it's not even the Clippers in terms of an impressive win specifically without Domantas Sabonis, but they haven't been a terrible team post-trade deadline, right? They were 8-6, they were 16th in defense, and I think over their last 14 games post-deadline. But I think even more notable, Alex, is just how bad the Knicks offense has been, even with Jalen Brunson, right? 13, 14 games post-deadline coming into this one, 17th in offense over that stretch, mostly with Brunson on the floor. And they completely break out in this game. And you could look to Mikal, you could look to OG, you could look to Deuce. But just across the board, guys were very, very aggressive and confident. And I think that was sort of the unifying theme in this offensive performance. I thought OG from the get-go, and look, he was aggressive against the Clippers and it didn't look as good. So maybe some of it is like the Kings just didn't really have a wing with Keegan Murray guarding Karl-Anthony Towns that was physical enough to defend him. But like his first play of the game was like a pump and go corner 3. The defense, you said it was like absolutely exceptional the whole night. Like he just consistently ate up space, got into Jonas Valanciunas' body, both in the half court and in transition. The passing was as good as, to the point of the career high, as good as we've ever seen from him. I think he might have had my favorite pass of his of the entire season. One of my favorite is the Knicks. We're at a pump and drive on DeMar, and he was staring at the rim like he was going to shoot and kind of baited Jonas Valanciunas to step up and then just drop like a no-look bounce pass to Mitchell Robinson for a layup, or excuse me, it was to Cat for a layup. And I was like, wow, I didn't really know he had that in him. Hit it off the dribble, step back 3, had this possession towards the end of the first half where he shut down DeRozan, switched on to Levine, shut him down too. He was rebounding the whole night, just a complete game, getting in passing lanes. Couldn't have played much better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to ever call an injury like a blessing in disguise or something, and it's definitely not. Like, I'd much rather have Brunson on the floor right now, but I do think that like this game was the first one where they didn't look like they were scrambling in life without Brunson. Like, it was like they came out with a different game plan, and we sort of saw, there were brief times where Brunson had to miss time last year, and it forced the Knicks to play a different way. And I think sort of led to the breakouts of Hart and Dante DiVincenzo in that way. Like, after Brunson had that knee scare and then had to miss like about 2 weeks, which is about what he's projected to miss with this ankle sprain, if the reports are to be believed, then, they were kind of forced to approach the game a little differently, embrace ball movement more, be less in that mode of just kind of watching Jalen work. And, I think that that's Tibbs's preferred way of doing things, but maybe this will even wake Tibbs up a little bit of like, this team is just made up of like great cutters, great shooters, guys that need, to be in motion to make things work. And, we saw in this game, I think, there was a lot of Hart also. I mean, Hart didn't get the gaudy assist numbers to, back it up, but he was initiating a lot of the offense too, and then setting up the pass that set up the pass. So, I mean, if there was if there was hockey assists tabulated in this game, he probably had like 6 or 7, just by virtue of being the guy to just kind of get downhill first, kick it out to someone who then maybe they get downhill, or maybe they just kick it to another shooter. It was just really beautiful stuff. I mean, it was just a lot of that sort of movement, and OG was right at the middle of that. I feel like as the main catalyst and the main guy that they were looking for. Obviously, had Cat continued his kind of resurgence with 26 points and looked a little more comfortable in this game, and kind of got that historic efficiency back a little bit with the 53% from the field, 50% from 3, almost 80% from the free throw line. Like, so you like to see him kind of getting his groove back in only 28 minutes. He only had to play 28 minutes and had 26 points. But OG, I think just kind of found that other gear, and a little different than, in a little different way than some of his bigger scoring performances on the year, like the Denver game, for example, where he was just mega hot shooting the ball. This one, it felt like a more complete effort, just looking to get his points in a variety of ways, looking to, create for others. I thought that he just kind of did a little bit of everything in this game. And, it was just kind of he was like the flag bearer for an overall different style of ball in this game, and the Knicks executing that style of ball for like the full 48 minutes, which I think is probably the biggest thing that they don't do sometimes with Brunson out there, when Tibbs just kind of settles into the prevent offense, if we want to call it that, of just, trying to, hold a lead or whatever late in the game, and then ultimately shooting themselves in the foot sometimes when they rely a little too hard on, just having Brunson ISO every play for the whole last quarter or so of the game.
Yeah, I think Mikal and Hart are ultimately the two guys that you're going to find initiating offense. I thought the mistake they made to some extent against the Clippers, partially was just that the Clippers are a fantastic defensive team. Without Brunson, the Knicks really aren't equipped to attack them. But Mikal and Hart are the two guys who still, like, especially when they get the ball on the move, have some ability to create an advantage off the dribble, right? That's not really Deuce McBride's game. Cat can create an advantage, but he can't capitalize on that advantage, at least as a passer, right? And it's why you saw Cat against the Clippers, and then Cat a little bit at the onset of this game. I compare it to, this is a very niche reference, but if anyone's seen the Shane Gillis, like, blind guy at a wedding sketch where he's just like stumbling around, like sprinting into people, it's less problematic than it sounds how I'm describing it. But anyways, that is kind of Cat on offense at times, where he just is just driving into 2, 3, 4 guys and just knocking them over and hoping he's on the right end of a foul call. I think we saw the Mikal Bridges in this game that I frankly, Alex, expected to see this entire year. And I thought we'd be getting the entire year. And in that Clippers game, like I shared that tweet that Prez put out, like breaking down his usage, where like most of his offense is incidental offense. And he's been treated like a fifth man all year, right? It's like, go score in transition, go score off cuts, go be a spot up shooter. And it's treating a guy that you gave a premium of picks up for and are presumably going to pay a premium contract to, like he's Landry Shamet. And last night they remembered that, like, hey, Mikal Bridges is like, I mean, he was the number one guy on a team for a year and a half. You can question how qualified he is for that, but he can do some of those things. Like early in this game, like had a catch, strong push dribble to the middle of the lane, no look out to Josh Hart for 3. You give it to him with a little momentum. Like he's not someone who's going to create from a standstill, but a dribble handoff, you run him off the screen into a catch, it is generally going to go well. Like another one where Hart just like dribbled at him hard, dribble handoff, Mikal gets on the move, goes into Trey Lyles, takes a bump, still finishes. The play of the night to me was him. This is something Manu Ginobili on the Spurs always did, right? Not waiting for the ball to get to you, sprinting into a catch, beating Lyles off the dribble, and then dunking around Keegan Murray. Like it was far and away the most aggressive drive we've seen from him this entire season. There was another one where he got a rebound and off a live dribble, just hit Shamet for a layup. Like he is capable of creating shots for other people. And to your point, with Jalen Brunson getting hurt, Tom Thibodeau has to lean into that a little bit. And hopefully when Brunson's back, it's something he remembers that Mikal Bridges is more than capable of doing.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. There's always some underdogs to play. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, and more. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to find. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The Big 12 tournament tips off with Kansas State facing Arizona State. K-State favored by 5.5, according to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
Head coach Kevin Keatts has been fired.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Some news happened this morning, Kenton, and actually caught the two of us completely off guard. We were both at church. I'm sitting there in the church service, and my phone starts buzzing. It buzzed once, buzzed twice, buzzed 3 times. I'm like, okay, that doesn't usually happen this time of morning. Kept buzzing. I'm like, nope, something just happened. The pastor gets a little bit louder. I'm like, okay, no, something definitely just happened. I take a little peek, which I'm not supposed to be doing in a church service. Sorry. Peek. Kevin Keatts has been relieved of his duties. He dropped a graphic, which is kind of funny. I'll read that in just a second. But Kenton, give me your gut reaction. Kevin Keatts has been fired as head coach of the NC State Wolfpack.
Well, nobody can say Boo Corrigan isn't making decisive and bold moves anymore.
Yep.
Because this is a massive buyout to eat. Like this, let's not make any bones about that. This is not some ho-hum, like, oh, yeah, you got to pay a little bit of money here and there. It happens. No. This is a massive buyout, but this was a move that we all felt like should happen or needed to. I don't know anybody that wasn't either in the camp of should or needed. The people who said should were like, if the money wasn't involved, you kind of should get rid of them. It would be a good thing. The people who said needed to were like, payout be damned. Get him away from this program. Well, everybody is now seeing what folks wanted or thought should have happened. So now it's the coaching search begins, and that's pretty much what I'm looking at here. Because honestly, I'm one of those people. The best day of your life is today, and the next best day is tomorrow. So what we can do today, start the coaching search. That's it. That's where I am with this thing at this point.
We've kind of talked about, some surrounding factors to a decision like this in these last couple weeks. Some of the comments that Coach Keatts has had in the post-game pressers basically alluding to the fact the NIL support was not there this year. And, if he had deeper pockets, he could get better players. And we talked about the impact of saying things like that when the season is going as poorly as it is. You can't really expect more people to jump on board and want to provide additional support if it wasn't there last year. And saying comments like that, it really starts to push people in the opposite direction. And I would love to know, we'll probably never get full clarity, but I would love to know the jump-off point for Boo Corrigan. I would love to know when it came over this timeline, because like we've said on here multiple times, we were told on good authority to not expect a coaching move this offseason. Just won the ACC title last year, just went to the Final Four. To fire a coach in just a year's time, it's a little bit crazy. But for NC State to buck up and do it now, they were certainly rubbed very wrong at some point in the last, I'd probably say like a month or maybe a couple weeks. Something has shown them the light, so to speak, that you cannot continue down the same road and expect different results. So although the decision, I guess, today was unexpected, I do think it is the correct decision. I do think if you want to revamp NC State, if you want to get them back on the track where they're consistently competing for ACC titles or consistently trying to get to the second weekend of March Madness or, further on down the road, Keatts was just not going to be the guy. And we know he did it last year, but when you look at the entirety of the body of work, it really looks like a fluke. It does. The team was 17-14 before going on that run. And, this year you move even further backwards in the wrong direction. I mean, honestly, we've talked about missing the ACC tournament. This is probably, all things considered, the worst season in school history. When you factor in everything, missing the ACC tournament, being in the bottom 3 of a new conference, which is 18 teams, coming off of what you did last year, it's embarrassing. And I'd have to imagine the shock factor of performing so poorly it pushed Boo Corrigan over the edge. So Kenton, like you said there, for all the people that have been critical of Boo Corrigan sitting on his hands and not putting out statements on social media, not being as loud about, all things NC State as Debbie Yao was, here you go. He's making the move now. And I think to capitalize on the timing of this, which is another key piece of this, it's a move in the right direction.
There were only 3 teams this year that did not win a single away game all year in the ACC. NC State, Boston College, and Miami. That's it.
And you just lost to Miami.
You lost to Miami on the road to end off this season. And there's another thing that I want to be very, very clear about here. When you talk about, you and Grayson said that there was no way that he'd get fired. Well, yes, no way, given that he had a subpar to bad season.
No one saw this coming.
This is a little bit unprecedented in terms of how far you fell in 1 year's time. And, you look at this situation and you say to yourself, well, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of you're getting a new coach. But I look at this season and still say, what a waste, because I don't think that last year was a fluke necessarily. I think that it was an adjustment in game plan due to some injuries that had occurred and due to some other things that had happened. There was an adjustment in game plan, and the adjustment worked out in a massive way. And it's something that we just did not see this year. Our starting lineup for most of the tournament runs included Mo Diarra and DJ Burns. Before the tournament, that was not the case. Mo Diarra was not a full-time starter last year. When he got inserted into the lineup, we all know the legend of Ramadan Mo and him absolutely cleaning the boards and whatnot, but he was not a full-time starter throughout last year. And this year we come back and see, hey, there was no priority on getting a glass cleaning big. There was no priority put on, hey, this is something that needs to happen. I get it. We missed out on some big-time guards that, I was told we're right in play for, and we missed out, sure. But the big portion of it was something that I also wanted to see that we just didn't meaningfully come close to addressing. So, for me, I look at this situation and I say, and that's another thing I want to talk about really quickly. Everybody litigating about whether or not last season was luck or whether or not it was just great adjustment, whether or not it was the players playing out of their mind. Who gives a damn? Who gives a damn? If I end up marrying Megan Thee Stallion because I hit the Powerball and all of a sudden, like I'm well above the tax bracket that most of the men trying to date her in, or if she just thinks I'm that guy, guess what? Either way, Miss Megan Pete is not my old lady. That's just how that works out. I don't give a damn how it happened or why it happened. It did happen. And what we do know is off of that happening, we had one of the worst seasons in NC State basketball history. Own that, live with that, move on from there. But stop all this whole humming and back and forth and about what did it mean? And is it luck? Is it skill? Or who cares? It happened.
I do think that the decision to make this move now, it revolves a lot around having standards for the program. And that's been a conversation for, I guess, really the entirety of Keats' tenure. You had the NCAA cloud over the program post-Gottfried in the first couple of years of Keats. And getting out of that, people just wanted to see consistent success. People want to see NC State get to the tournament, pretty much each and every year. That should be the goal every single year, especially the storied history that this program did have that got kind of lost along the way in the early 2000s up until somewhat recently. State fans just want NC State to be competitive. We don't want to have to wait for the one-off or make a tournament once and have to sit for 3 years and, oh, great, we're back on the bubble. Are we ever going to do anything ever again? We can't live for the one-off. This program has to have standards. And I think firing Keats directly after winning the ACC title and going to the Final Four, this is a statement of we have to have standards. You can't have the worst program or the worst season in program history after what you just accomplished. All the momentum that you should be having right now. Punt. The 67-yard punt downfield, and it was coffin cornered, a perfect punt. That's how brutal the situation is. Okay, to Keats' credit, and I'll read some of his statement here, he's done a lot of talking about NIL. The NIL wasn't where it should be for the program. Now, that's not an excuse for the way the season panned out, but the NIL did not match where the standards should be for this program. And I've seen a couple people here in the comments, well, now's your time. If you want to talk about NIL, now is the time to get involved, because the new coach, whoever it may be, we'll talk about that also, is going to need more help than you could possibly imagine. $2 million has been the number floating around with what NC State had to work with this year. It ain't going to cut it. You will never compete outside of, a magical run with just $2 million, especially in the ACC. So, the NIL is a big portion of this, but for me, the overarching statement made by Boo Corrigan making this move right now is standards. NC State is making the conscious decision to be competitive, and not just be competitive, but stay competitive. They see what Duke and Carolina have done down the street. They're not the Duke and Carolina. Well, maybe Duke is, but those two are not the powers, the superpowers that they used to be. This is a time that NC State needs to take advantage of that. Hubert Davis, I'll go ahead and take my shots now. Hubert Davis is kind of fumbling around over there in Chapel Hill. That's when NC State needs to strike. We've waited forever to try and strike back because freaking Roy Williams owned us. He owned us. Now Roy Williams is gone. Hubert Davis is fumbling around. That's when NC State needs to strike. You went to the Final Four last year. You won the ACC title. That's the momentum we've been craving for 40 plus years. It had to be now. It had to be now. And so I want to give a lot of credit to Boo Corrigan, because it's not an easy decision. He's just won himself a ton of money in extensions and bonuses, and to wipe all that out in a calendar year, let's put in your cojones on the table. Boo Corrigan said, nope, we will have standards. I'm tired of sitting around waiting. Standards will be taken care of right now.